Hello and welcome back to Instant Insights. At Global Data Strategic Intelligence, we track over 100 tech, industry, ESG, and macro themes impacting all major sectors. I'm Carolina Pinto, and today I'm joined by Fiona Barry, Editor-in-Chief and Director of Farm Source. Fiona, how are you?
Hi, Carolina. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. And I'm also joined by Manasi Vaidya, an editor with Pharmaceutical Technology and Global Data Insights. How are you?
Hi, Carolina. I'm doing good. Here, cold in New York, but doing good.
Thank you so much for joining me. So last week, the healthcare industry congregated in San Francisco for the 2025 JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. This is a conference that gathers investors and executives in the biotech and pharma industry. You guys been covering it all of last week, so I kind of just wanted to get you guys onto the podcast to kind of discuss. At the conference, there was quite a few big deals. Manasi, can you start us off? Tell us what's happened at the conference.
Yeah, sure. As a standard for this meeting, we saw several small and big deals being announced. The overall sense was that the appetite for deals is increasing, and news like J&J buying the central nervous system disorder focused company Intracellular Therapeutics, GSK buying IDRX, Eli Lilly acquiring the oncology company Scorpion Therapeutics all signal this shifting sentiment. All of these deals were in an excess of $1 billion, and the J&J Intracellular acquisition was one of the biggest in over a year at $14.6 billion. This is coming after a particularly slow year for M&A in the biotech industry. Alison Lapia, a global data analyst, has written that there was a 47% decrease in the total value of deals done in 2024 compared to the previous year. However, investors are now hoping that falling interest rate, a potential change at FTC, could influence market trends for the better. Last year, there was also a very slow start to IPOs, but things picked up in the last 2 quarters, and experts have told reporter Robert Parry that a resurgence is truly expected in 2025. What were some of the major themes that you noticed, Fiona?
Yeah, so a good way to keep your finger on the pulse with investment in the pharma industry, I find, is to hear what the suppliers to the pharma industry are saying, because it's very much in their interest to look out for what's coming in the pipeline. So those contract manufacturing and research organizations pretty much seem to agree that there's a recovery in the earlier stage venture capital money flowing into small biotechs. It's been a bad couple of years, but getting better. Although actually Charles River Labs, which is a supplier of research services, it dropped its revenue outlook for the year, and it agreed that there is a recovery in biotech VC money. That's where a lot of its customers come from. But interestingly, the CEO noted that when you look at the actual number of new biotech companies, rather than the value of the cash that's flowing into them, there are far fewer of those VC-backed biotechs in 2024. So about 300 new ones last year compared to around 600 in 2021. So those are those really early stage of pharma companies that don't have anything on the market yet, but they are maybe in the discovery or very early research stages, and they're what's going to be feeding those new molecules into the pharma industry in the coming years.
Another story that everyone's watching closely has been the BIOSECURE Act
Yes.
and its impact on US-China relations. What do you think we could take away from the discussions at the conference?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're in any way involved with pharma or biotech, all you were talking about in 2024 was the BIOSECURE Act, which is kind of funny because it hasn't even passed yet. Briefly, for some background, this is a proposed bill in the US. In short, it would dampen US funding of any companies that outsource anything in their supply chain to Chinese biotechnology providers. So it won't, if it passes, it won't outright ban contracting with Chinese suppliers, but what it will do is it will prevent any federal funding from the US government going to any pharma company, any biotech company that somewhere in its supply chain outsources to certain Chinese biotechnology companies. Now, everyone expected, or many people expected, that the BIOSECURE Act would pass in December 2024. It was a surprise when it didn't. So I think JPM in January was about people still trying to figure out what is going to happen. There were two Chinese contract manufacturing organizations that presented at JPM, which were very interesting. WuXi Biologics and WuXi AppTec. Now, both of these organizations are named specifically in the draft of the BIOSECURE Act as companies of concern. Now, what those companies do, they're contract manufacturing organizations. They supply the pharma industry with the drugs. They actually do the manufacturing, and they do some other services as well. WuXi Biologics specializes in large molecule drug manufacturing. Now, this was really interesting. In the CEO's presentation at JPM, there was a complete 180. Last year, there were rumors that WuXi Biologics and WuXi AppTec, both of them, which are independent companies, although they are somewhat linked, but they operate independently. There were rumors that they were actually selling off European manufacturing facilities because BIOSECURE was on the horizon. Maybe European, North American customers were being scared off and didn't want to outsource to those companies. But at JPM, WuXi Biologics CEO came out all guns blazing, saying the company is doing incredibly well and very healthily. He predicted that the company would have half of its revenue coming from its foreign facilities by 2030. And he said that the company's winning even more foreign contracts than ever. So really, customers, pharma companies are not being put off by the prospect of BIOSECURE. Also, very interestingly and surprisingly to me, he completely denied that the reason for WuXi Biologics selling off vaccine manufacturing site that it has in Dundalk in Ireland was anything to do with BIOSECURE. He said it was just financially prudent to sell it at this time, even though the site had only really properly opened in 2021, 2022. So really interesting from him. My colleague Catherine Kinch covered WuXi AppTec, which produces small molecule drugs. The CEO there was also minimizing the effect of BIOSECURE. Something that I think is very interesting was that WuXi AppTec's presentation really stressed the IP protections that the company could give to anyone contracting or outsourcing to WuXi AppTec. Now, that's historically been a big fear for foreign companies doing business in China. And it's also somewhat behind some of the fears behind the BIOSECURE Act. The US is worried about trade secrets or other information falling into Chinese hands. So very interesting that they are coming in with, like, one of their first slides was, hey, we have fantastic IP protection, not something that usually a company would stress at a conference. So that's what the Chinese CMOs are saying. Outside China, we had some contract manufacturing organizations and suppliers like Thermo Fisher, which is an American company, saying at JPM that customers are moving outside China to Western countries or to India. So we'll see, basically. And in the meantime, we don't even know whether the BIOSECURE Act is going to pass this year under the new administration. We're recording on a Tuesday, so just the day after Trump's inauguration. So it remains to be seen what's going to happen on that front.
Yes, the incoming administration's impact on the pharma sector was on top of everyone's minds. But most in the industry seem to have adopted a wait-and-see approach. All eyes are now on the administration's plans for the controversial Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, which introduced the framework for price negotiations for drugs covered under Medicare. On 17th of January, the outgoing Biden administration announced the second round of drugs that are up for negotiations. And Jenna Philpott, a reporter with Pharmaceutical Technology, highlighted how the wildly popular weight loss medication semaglutide, which is marketed by Novo Nordisk as Ozempic or Wegovy, is on this list. This means that a lower negotiated price for this really popular drug could go into effect by 2027. And while this was expected by many in the field, the upcoming months when these negotiations are meant to happen will be interesting to watch. as the new administration has indicated its desire to do away with a lot of the former President Biden's policies. At JPM, Javier Becerra, the HHS secretary in the previous Biden administration, said that the US often pays too much for drugs and hence these prices need to come down. He also said that he sees pharma companies are still committed to the US markets and the prices here are still higher than other countries. We'll have to wait and see what happens with these GLP-1 drugs. Fiona, did you see anything in the news regarding that?
Yeah, so let's talk about those big players for these weight loss drugs. You've got the Danish Novo Nordisk and you've got the American Eli Lilly that are at the forefront. Now, Novo Nordisk was not present at JP Morgan this year, although it was last year. Now, Novo Nordisk's parent company, Novo Holdings, acquired a contract manufacturing organization called Catalent last year. So Catalent is a big supplier to the pharma industry, produces a lot of their drugs. With that acquisition, some, but not all of Catalent's facilities are going to be taken out of the market in terms of capacity for manufacturing these kinds of drugs. That's something that a competitor to Catalent, Thermo Fisher, mentioned at JPM, that this is great. We're going to be able to fill in that gap in the market. But going back to those GLP-1s, so we've got Novo Nordisk not there this year, Catalent not there this year, but Eli Lilly was present at JP Morgan. Eli Lilly had a lower revenue forecast than had previously been indicated. The CEO put that down to basically what I think a lot of us know, which is that it's just difficult to produce enough of these drugs. There have been on and off shortages of loads of these GLP-1 drugs, and they just can't be made fast enough for demand.
Yeah, the GLP-1 drugs have also been part of a hot button topic on drug prices in the US. And in recent years, online pharmacies have emerged as a major platform for delivering these to consumers. And it's not just the obesity drugs, but online pharmacies now are responsible for providing cheaper insulin, drugs for mental health disorders, and so many other conditions. At the conference, the CEO of GoodRx, a leading online provider of drug price coupons, said that there hasn't been a better time to influence the gap in the US healthcare delivery model. According to pricing data from Global Data, there has been an average increase of 4% in prices of more than 250 branded drugs just this month. The GoodRx CEO championed partnerships like the one it had with Novo Nordisk to provide discounts on GLP-1 agonists as potential models that could be seen in this space.
And what about the other big pharma players we haven't mentioned?
Yes, others like AstraZeneca, Novartis took the opportunity to outline their plans for 2025. Most large companies were bullish on diversifying their pipelines and setting up market expectations for key catalysts this year. One example of this was AbbVie, which has been losing significant revenue since biosimilars to its blockbuster drug Humira entered the market in 2023. Abigail Beeney, a reporter with Clinical Trials Arena, reports that AbbVie is now doubling down on promoting its other biologics, Skyrizi and Rinvoq, to fill that gap. To further drive home the point, at JPM, AbbVie CEO Rob Michael said that in the US, only 20% of patients have moved to Humira biosimilars since they got introduced, while a lot of others have moved on to other drugs like Skyrizi and Rinvoq. Both of these drugs have now captured 50% of the market for inflammatory bowel diseases like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. So there's a lot happening in the pharma sector and a lot expected in 2025. So we'll have to wait and watch.
Yeah, I think like everyone else, we're probably recovering this week after a very busy JPM.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for filling me in. That was a lot of information. I'm not a pharma expert, but thank you for coming on the podcast. I hope you had a nice time. And for everyone listening, and from us at Strategic Intelligence, see you next time.
Thanks, Carolina.